So you think you can read 100 books this year? Here are a booktuber's secrets to reading 100 books consistently throughout the year. It's the beginning of the year, everyone's posting all their goals on Goodreads, on their YouTube channels, all the book outlets, social media platforms, all of it. We all have our plans, and I don't know if you always hit your goal or if you tend to put too big of a goal and don't really know how to achieve it. If that's you, stick around to learn how I managed to read 100 books a year pretty easily. Let's get into it. You also might be watching because you love my content, and if you do, definitely check out my Patreon linked below for bonus videos. The first tip is read. The first thing I realized in hitting my 100 book goals for the last 3 years consistently is I stopped reading what I felt I should be reading. To clarify, do you ever feel judgment for what you read because you're not reading Frankenstein or Shakespeare or something real fancy and uptight? You're not the only one. A lot of people think readers should be reading classics or literary fiction, specifically adult fiction, things that, you know, you should be reading. And let me just tell you, life is not about what you should be doing. And if it is, that sounds like a really sad life. You should get married. You should buy a house. You should have kids. That just sounds like a horrible idea, especially if you just don't like kids. That sounds real bad. So I highly recommend you stop shoulding things and read what you want. One of the books that really got me into reading was Red Queen, and I talk about it a lot on my channel. It is a YA fantasy that has a lot of tropes. The specific trope that I love that's in this one is a love triangle. Because of this book, now I love YA fantasy, and I especially hunt down YA fantasies that have love triangle tropes. If you go on social media, you see so many people rag on love triangle tropes, rag on YA, saying it's not real literature. And let me just tell those people, who cares? You're reading. Here's the thing I don't get about reading elitists who say that they should be reading this or that, like Russian classic literature, or else you're not really reading. Mind you, you're reading for your own specific goals, the things you want to do in life. The reason why I'm reading so much and why I find it to be so important, it helps me with my dyslexia. I'm dyslexic, and the more I read, the stronger my brain gets at retaining words, because I have a real issue recalling words, and that's why I avoided reading for most of my life. I have a whole video where I talk about my journey into kind of loving reading again. I'm sure you have your own specific reason, whether it's to become more knowledgeable, more empathetic, which we all need. Pick up a book, even a YA book, get some empathy under that. You know, you have your own reasons for reading. Why would you need to read a specific book? You are not trying to please anyone else but yourself and your own goals. Even when I went to college and even during high school, I only read the books that I wanted. Even when books were assigned to me, I mean, opinions elsewhere might say different things. I didn't read a lot of my school books. I skimmed them, I found summaries for them, I talked to my friends, we traded off chapters needing to read and would summarize it to each other, because life's too short to be humming and hawing and struggling through books that won't spark our interest. The real reason why you might not be hitting your 100 book goal is because you're reading for weeks on end a book that is dragging your soul. Let's stop that. In 2022, let's DNF these books. And I really think I'm going to be making a whole video about how to DNF books, because I think this community could use some of that. You know, it's fun to hate read and hate watch sometimes, but if you have a goal you're trying to reach, and you're trying to reach that goal for a very specific reason that's near and dear to you, go after it. Don't let books that aren't interesting you get in your way. Read books that interest you, and that may include mangas. I read probably like 10% of my books are mangas. I thoroughly enjoy a good romantic manga. It's my bread and butter. I wouldn't even consider that a guilty pleasure, because it's not guilty. It's a book. I'm reading. I'm learning about new characters, getting into a different story. It's just may have heavy tropes or whatever. But you know what? I like it. so I'm gonna read it. And that's what's important. Please, read what you like. Please, I'm begging you. Now let's step into some more actionable tips besides reading for fun, for your enjoyment, books that you like. Besides that, what can you actually do to read more? And that's establishing reading every day. Here is an actionable tip that you can do. If you are on your phone a lot, say every time you use the restroom, I see you. I also do it too. It's not a big deal. We all, sometimes scroll on our phones while doing a number 1 or 2. It happens. We're human. Try this instead. If you have an ebook on Kindle, open that up instead. And instead of scrolling for 5 to 10 minutes, you could be reading for 5 minutes and then being like, oh, I'm on the toilet, so I need to go somewhere else. Let me put my book away. That's the same for like when you're in line for your groceries or whatever. Instead of opening Instagram or opening Twitter every time you open up a social media app, think in your head, oh, I should actually open my ebook app and read my book today. That's a great way to get a lot of reading in. I'm sure if you look at your screen time on your phone, it says you spend probably between 2 to even 8 hours on your phone every day. And it'll tell you what apps you use the most. Maybe Safari, maybe it's news. You're getting lots of news outlets that bombard you with every single thing. Maybe it's social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, all those notifications. Every time you're inclined to pick up your phone and start scrolling on the gram, I recommend you open up Kindle. Especially during those bathroom breaks. That's what I do. It really helps. It does. Honest. Let's also take the time to redefine reading right now, because most of my reading is done through audiobooks. There are a lot of people out there who say, that's not really reading. Mind you, that person who says that probably doesn't even read that much. There are so many people out there who will be like, audiobooks isn't real reading. And ask them how many books they read last year. Notice how little it is and be like, okay, so you're not a reader. Cool. Audiobook reading is just a different way of taking in the story. It is reading, even if you're not physically reading the words, you are ingesting the story. And it also really helps if you're super busy. You can put on the audiobook during your commute to work, or since a lot of us work from home, you can put it on while you're making breakfast or laundry, a lot of those mundane tasks. I love listening to an audiobook when I have to do my wash and go routine, because that is a whole Sunday that is gone for me. Like many hours of putting product in my hair mask, shampoo, conditioner, leave-in conditioner, gel, blow dry. That's so many hours. And I don't feel like I'm wasting them anymore because I put on an audiobook. A link down below to a couple apps that I use a lot. Highly recommend Libro FM. It's very much like Audible. I have a referral code that'll get you a free month, and then it also hits me back with a free book, but I don't get any money from it. Also, Scribd is a great account. Again, I have a referral link down below for a free trial where you pay 10 bucks a month and you have unlimited amount of audiobooks. It's more like 3 or so before it starts limiting you, but it's still a very good app. I use it every month and it's worth every penny in my opinion. Great. So listen to those audiobooks without shame. It's okay. And I know a lot of people are getting into podcasts, which is surprising because that's, again, just listening to people talk about a subject when you could be putting on an audiobook. Getting closer to that 100-book goal. We've talked about how to maybe detract from doom scrolling and things like that actionable goal. Another thing you could start actually doing is mixing up how you read. So you are now probably reading for enjoyment if you listen to my first tip, which I highly recommend because you should be reading for you and no one else. Now you're reading for enjoyment. You're picking up maybe a YA fantasy. You've read like a couple series back to back and you're starting to get tired. And the inkling of a reading slump happens when you don't feel like reading anymore. A way to avoid that and kind of avoid the months of not reading that can happen to us readers, especially avid readers who may ingest 10 to 20 books a month. What may help you avoid that slump is mixing up your genres and the way you read the book. So maybe you physically read and that's your favorite way to read. So you read, I don't know, a giant series like Game of Thrones physically because you're so invested in it. So what do you want to do immediately after finishing it? You want to go to the next big fantasy series that's really dense, and you're like, I'm gonna love it just as much. Again, if you're reading for fun and reading what you want, that seems smart, but I actually warn against it. You should definitely mix up your genres or mix up the way you read, because we're human. Reading can get boring. And I'm an avid reader. I'd like to call myself an avid reader now, because I do read more than 100 books a year. It can get boring, y'all. Like, maybe after you finish a really big series, allow yourself to read some fluffy romance. Allow yourself to read a manga or a comic book. Make sure you mix it up on the occasion, because if you read back to back large, heavy, dense stories, or even a lot of fluffy books back to back, you might get bored, because it can get boring. Anything you do heavily and every single day, like it becomes a really good habit and you're like knocking out all those books, you might get tired of it. Same with your favorite dish. Have you ever had a favorite dish at a restaurant? You've had it for years and you kind of get a little tired of it? Mix things up every once in a while. It definitely helps. And if you're that crazy person in the back who's like, I eat the same meal every time I go to that restaurant and I enjoy it so much, so I have no idea what you're talking about, consider the fact that you probably have different variations when you eat at home. When you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you mix it up probably every once in a while. You're not consistently eating the same meal every single day. That can be taxing. That could be overwhelming to your senses and being like, wow, I don't even remember what this is supposed to bring up. You gotta mix it up. The thing I do is whenever I'm in a reading slump, I go to mangas. They are so easy to read, and I just kind of always know what to expect, but just trying a new story and just trying to see if I like the new characters. They're such a fast, quick read. So you could look at mangas and comics. Those are very easy to like mix it up, but you could also maybe look at middle grade. A lot of us, either adults, new adults, adults who, you know, have a real classy job and stuff, you guys probably read middle grade when you were growing up, like the Spiderwick Chronicles or the Series of Unfortunate Events. Consider re-looking at those books. They were classic, fun middle grade for a reason. Another actionable tip I really highly recommend is create an anticipated reads list. It doesn't have to be new releases. It just needs to be books you're excited about, because there are going to be a few moments when you have no idea what to read next. You either just finished a book that was really amazing. Why is everyone dying? Or a book that was just indifferent, or maybe you didn't enjoy. Everyone raves about this book, but I am so bored. And you're not stimulated to read. I recommend right now making an actual list of maybe 10 to like 50 books, depending on how many books you're excited about right now. Write them all down. Make sure that there's a few different genres in there. Maybe there's an audiobook for one of your favorite books that's coming out that has a really good narrator. Whatever it may be, write that list right now, so that way when you kind of get stumped either halfway through the year or maybe a month from now, because it happens, you have something to look back on. Do it. Make that list. It's another actionable way to get closer to that 100 books if you actually know of 100 books that you're really excited about. Let's get it, fam. Okay, so my last tip for you is to try and have an accountability buddy. I, starting YouTube, accidentally kind of created my own accountability buddy, which has been the most exciting and like fulfilling thing I've done. I could not recommend it enough. I highly recommend it. I know a couple people who are part of the Brown Girl Book Club have mentioned in the Discord that they are making booktube channels because they're having so much fun creating a community, even if you're not like a really big booktuber, because that's not really everyone's goal. We just love books. Having an accountability buddy to always kind of lean on and be like, this is how much I read this month. I'm on track for my goal. Or I was a little bit behind, but maybe I can catch up. Or I didn't read at all. It happens. Having that buddy to kind of always check back in helps you immensely. You know, around New Year's time, we all get real crazy with our goals and we're like, I'm gonna work out every day and I'm gonna lose 40 pounds and I'm gonna read 100 books. And then a month later, you're like, what was my goal again? But a way to not forget your goal is to have an accountability buddy. I recommend social media platforms because it's a really fun way to engage with people differently and not to have your social media solely be doom scrolling, because it's 2022, you know, we're trying to sprinkle some positivity in the atmosphere. If you don't want to use social media, you could also make an accountability buddy with either a partner or a friend or with your planner. Something I started doing, and I'll maybe take a picture or insert it here, is taking note of every book you've read that month, the day you finished it, what you rated it. Something I started doing in like 2019. I highly recommend you use your planner. It is a judgment-free zone, because booktube and social media can be hard. If you tell everybody your goal was to read 10 books or even 4 books that were on your TBR and you were so excited for them and you ended up not doing any of that, and that's the pressure in the beginning of my booktube journey that got me into reading. So just know what kind of person you are, what motivates you. If saying you're gonna read 10 books and telling your accountability buddy, if that motivates you in a positive way, because positivity is normally what we lean towards. If something makes you feel good, you tend to do it more often than if it makes you feel bad. So if you make a goal of reading 10 books and you end up reading 9 and it makes you feel horrible and disgusting, maybe don't do that. Because you know what? Hitting your goals is great and all, but it's not everything. Last tip is to really have fun. Do what you want, do what you enjoy. If you end up not reading for a few months, it's okay. There's a specific reason why you have this goal to read so much, and just make sure you're still trying to attain that goal and you're not freaking out over the number. Instead, focus on the experience, making reading fun, having a good time reading a book you love or reading a book you hate with a few friends. Hate reading has become, I think, a new hobby in the booktube sphere, and I think that's totally okay as long as you're having fun with it. You don't have to be reading literary fiction to be reading a good book. So those are all my tips on how to read 100 books consistently. Let me know if you're going to utilize any of these tips, and if you made it to the end of this video, comment down below this emoji so I know you are the real MVP. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this video. Last year I also had more actionable goals on how to read more books, some different tips and tricks along the way, so I highly recommend you checking out this video. And you know what? I hope this video gave you a little bit more sunshine, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! And huge mother effing shout out to my Patreons. Pew pew pew. My goal is to reach 30 Patreons, and then maybe I'll start doing live shows regularly with them. Okay, bye.